When writing a programming language, a conditional statement can be used to tell your programming sequence what steps to take given a certain logical conclusion. A basic example could be if you want to go out on a certain day and you want to make a decision on your dress choice. Now, you are not sure what to wear, so you consider the weather. If it is rainy weather, you want to put on a raincoat. If it's a sunny weather, you want to put on a t-shirt. If it's a cold weather, you want to put on a sweatshirt. In today's video, we're going to cover Python conditional statements, if, else, for loops, and while loops. Stick around. And here, of course, we have the Jupyter Notebook project opened up where we've named it Python conditions and loops. Now, let us start by declaring two variables. All right, so now the first statement we're going to be exploring will be the if statement. And the way you write that is you just say the if, then you write the condition statement. Now, let's try the less than statement. If A is less than B, what should it do? Let's just keep it simple and say print B. When you run this, it will print out the value which is in the print, encapsulated in print. Reason being that A is less than B. Okay. If you are to run the same code here, but instead say A is greater than B, and you run it, you see it doesn't print anything because A is not greater than B. So that statement is not a true statement. And if it's not a true statement, it cannot execute the print action. Okay. Now, for cases like this, you can introduce another parameter, which we call else. Okay. Now, you have to watch out for your indentation. Okay. Else. So here it's saying if A is greater than B, it should print. Let me change this to A is greater than B, then else just print A is less. I hope it makes sense. So when you print that, it will come up with the value of A is lesser than B because that's actually what it is. Okay. Now let us introduce another variable called C, and let C be equal to A. Okay, so ideally the value of C should be 20. So A is 20, C is 20. All right, so let's come back here. So when you run it, it's going to give you A is equal to C. All right. So what if you wanted to run two tests like this one? You just have one check, which is A and is equal to C. Okay, so what if you wanted to check for two conditions? What would you do? Now here you have, if A is greater than B, print A is greater than B. Else, if, let me add another statement, another condition, which is else if, now the else if gives you the permission to add one more condition to be tested. Okay, so the first condition is A is greater than B. So let's now see else if A is equal to C, print A is equal. So actually you use this one when you are testing for more than one condition. Okay, so the first condition we're checking for is if A is greater than B, print A is greater than B. Else if A is equal to C, print A is equal to C. So when you run that, it will not print the first one, A is greater than B, because it doesn't apply, but it matches with the second one, so it's going to print the second one. So, but let me try this in another way. Let's say if A is greater than B, okay, let me change this to less than, so the condition will actually become a true statement, and let's run it and see what it gives us. Okay, so now what this is saying is the first condition is met. So it prints the first condition and ignores the second condition. So you can see the else if condition takes is triggered if the first condition is not met. The next statement we're going to be looking at will be the while statement. Now, the while statement checks to see while a condition is true, execute a certain action. Okay, so let's assume that we have a variable called I, and I is equal to 1. You can say while this same I is less than maybe 5. So while the value of I is less than 5, print I. Okay, and while you print I, increment I by 1. Okay, so when you run that, it will give you this particular response. So what this is saying is the value of I is 1. So while I is 1, print 1, then add 1 to it, so I becomes 2. But 2 is still less than 5. So print 2 because it's less than 5, okay? Then add 1 to 2, it becomes 3. 3 is still less than 5, print 3, then keep increasing it until it gets to 4. Then when you increase from 4 to 5, it will not print that anymore. So it will have to end the statement at that point. So that's one use case of the while loop. We can also introduce a break statement into this. Now let me rewrite this. Now what I'm going to do here is, after you print the first I, let's check to see. Let's write an if statement. Okay, if the value of I, I'm just giving an example, okay, equal to maybe 3. So maybe let me make this 7 so that we can have more a wider range to loop over. So if I is equal to 3, so let me break it at this point, okay. So if I run this, you see the value it gives to me. So what this is doing is, it's just like the previous example, it keeps on running through the while loop. But when I increments up to 3 and I is equal to 3, break it. Similarly, you can introduce a continue. Now let me declare a fresh loop. In this case, I'm going to start my I counting from 0. So in this case, I'm going to say while I is less than 6. Now, the first thing I'm doing here is I'm going to be incrementing it. So the first value of I here is going to be 1. Okay. So when I is 1, if I is equal to 3, continue. Okay. But it's not equal to 3. So print I. So to keep on printing 1, 2, but when it gets to 3 and I becomes 3, it will not print it, it will continue. So this continue will make it jump over what is here and go back to this part here. So when we run this, you will notice that it will have 1, 2, jump over 3, and let us see. So here you can see it has 1, 2, but when it gets to 3, it jumps over 3 and goes to 4. So it doesn't print the third value, okay? The fourth statement, let me just create a basic loop. Let me create a basic list. Now, if we're going to be running a for statement, we can just say for x in weather is the list, by the way, the variable containing the list. So for x in weather, if x equal to, let's say, so what this does is simple. It runs through the list and it checks for when the value of x will be equal to sun, and then it prints it out. But just imagine that there was no value, there was nothing to print. To run through the list and it won't print out anything. Okay. So this can also be used in different ways. You know, you can just choose to say If for X in weather, you can decide to run a basic print. You can just decide to print everything. So it just prints out the values as it is. You can also use a for loop as applied to a range of numbers. You can just say, by the way, a range is written in this format, and you can just say range of 6. A range of 6 is between 0 to 5, by the way. So if you write a for statement for X in range 6, the same thing. You can just say print X. So to print from 0 and stop at 5, okay? The same way, you can choose to print within, you don't have to print from 0 to 6. You can choose to say from maybe 2 and just carve it out. But here it's going to print from 2 to 5. So for range, you can just say from 2 to 6. Now in this case, it's going to take from 2 to 5 and print out the values. In addition to that, if you notice the print sequence here is counting them with increments of 1, okay? But you can choose to do it in increments of 2 or 3 or 4. All you need to do, let me increase this to maybe 10 or 20. Now, if you print it this way, it's going to give from 2 to 20, 2 to 19 rather, but you can choose to put it in steps of maybe 4. And if that's the case, it will be printing it in steps of 4. So from 2 to add 4 to 6 to 10 to 14 to 18, okay? And that's it for today's video. I hope you gained something. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and comment on this video. Tell us what you think. And until the next video, bye-bye.